The graduate school admissions are nearing an end. At the same time, a post titled, "What happened to the boy who left the last two questions blank for you?" goes viral. Amid countless comments criticizing people who throw away their futures for love, one young woman's boastful comment stands out. She writes, "Back then he left the last two questions blank just so he could attend the same college as me. Now he gives up his chance to attend graduate school abroad, so that we won't have to enter a long-distance relationship. He says that between his future and me, I'll always be more important." Those who know they are loved always have the confidence to take it for granted. As soon as the comment is posted, countless replies pour in. There are envious replies and increasing arguments over the topic. "I feel a twinge of envy because my boyfriend and I are the exact opposite. When my boyfriend does poorly on his exam, I want to apply to the same college as him. However, he advises me against it, saying my future is more important. Yesterday, he tells me he fails to secure a graduate school recommendation and won't be able to go abroad with me to continue his studies." Staring at the two lines on the pregnancy test, I begin seriously thinking about our future. Perhaps because the young woman has received too many hateful comments, she eventually posts a photo showing her boyfriend's side profile. She gloats, "You're all just jealous because I have a handsome boyfriend who loves me this much, aren't you?" The instant I see the photo, my blood runs cold. The man in that picture belongs to Joshua Salter, my boyfriend of 7 years. Everything from the past comes crashing over me like a tsunami. It turns out the signs have been there all along. I wipe away my tears. Joshua is right. Between my future and him, my future is indeed more important. Vivian's POV. I clicked on the young woman's profile picture. The next moment, a familiar face appeared before me. It was my boyfriend Joshua Salter's childhood sweetheart, Michaela Urban. She had been part of Joshua's life even longer than I had. I spent the entire night watching all 20 videos on Michaela's profile. The videos spanned from high school to college, recording every little moment between Michaela and Joshua. The very first video was from a week before the exam. Michaela sobbed her heart out in front of the camera, saying she didn't want to be separated from Joshua. Beneath the video, someone with a starry sky profile picture had replied, "Your wish will come true." I stared at that profile picture, and the last trace of doubt in my heart vanished. The picture featured Neptune, the planet Joshua had talked about with me countless times. It was his favorite planet. It was also the planet I knew best, despite knowing next to nothing about astronomy. During those countless days and nights we spent apart, whenever I missed Joshua, I would observe Neptune through the lab's telescope. I'd imagine Joshua was right there beside me, or that we were gazing at the same starry sky. But it turned out that while I was away, he had Michaela by his side. I walked over to the table and unwrapped the carefully packaged gift. It was the graduation gift I had prepared for Joshua today. Inside it was a pregnancy with 2 pink lines. I had taken it last night after Joshua told me he had failed to secure a spot in graduate school. I was carrying our baby, the fruit of our 7-year relationship. The moment I found out about her, my heart had pounded wildly. Countless thoughts had raced through my mind. For years ago, Joshua and I had ended up in different cities for the sake of our futures. Now, for years later, we were about to end up in different countries. Was the baby's arrival telling me that I should be brave for love, just this once? The thoughts that had already crossed my mind thousands upon thousands of times had resurfaced. Could I give up my chance to attend graduate school abroad and stay by Joshua's side? Could I make up for all the years we'd spent apart? With those thoughts swirling in my mind, I'd carefully wrapped up the gift. I'd planned to tell Joshua in person about my decision. But now, that decision became nothing but a complete and utter joke. It turned out that from the very beginning, I'd never been part of Joshua's future. Even though we had walked side by side all this way, he still turned without hesitation and chose the winding road that had Michaela on it. Even my future and I combined couldn't compare to Michaela in his eyes. So I threw the pregnancy test into the trash. I opened my laptop and logged into the website. Without hesitation, I clicked confirm. Vivian's POV. I no longer wanted a 7-year relationship where I was never the one he chose. When Joshua walked into the hotel room, I had just finished washing up. He was carrying some freshly baked buns, milk, and churros. I reached for the food, but Joshua instinctively pulled them out of my reach. He explained apologetically, Mickey specifically asked me to buy these for her yesterday. If you're hungry, I'll take you to eat at the college cafeteria later. You know Mickey has quite the temper. If she finds out I didn't do what she asked, she'll throw a fit." I lowered my eyes and withdrew my hand. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Ever since high school, Michaela had ordered Joshua around freely far more than I, his girlfriend, ever did. When we went to the movies, she had to sit with Joshua. On her birthday, she demanded that Joshua buy her a cake and cut it with her. When we went to an amusement park, she always got Joshua to accompany her when she wanted to go into the haunted house. I had argued with Joshua about it countless times. But every single time, he would insist that he only doted on her like she was his little sister. Later, Joshua and I ended up separated by thousands of miles. And so Michaela disappeared from my life. On the few chances we were able to reunite, I didn't want to argue with Joshua over Michaela. At the same time, he never brought her up on our dates. I thought Michaela had finally grown up and learned to respect boundaries. But looking back now, I could see that one had been happy to give, and the other had been more than willing to take. With an empty stomach, I walked toward Joshua's car. Just as I was about to open the front passenger door, he stopped me. "Vivi, sit in the back," he said. "I'm picking up Mickey on the way to the graduation ceremony." I looked at him and smiled. "Is the front passenger seat reserved exclusively for Michaela? I'm your girlfriend. Can't I sit there?" Joshua's expression darkened slightly. "Vivi, don't make things difficult. I don't want to argue with you about Mickey today. She can be quite childish. Just let her have her way." I'd been giving in to her for 7 years. In fact, I'd practically handed Joshua over to her. If I kept stepping aside, would there still be a place for me beside Joshua? I didn't know the answer to that question, but it no longer mattered to me now. I did as Joshua wished and got into the back seat. As soon as I closed the door, I couldn't help but sneeze as the strong scent of rose perfume hit my nose. It was Michaela's favorite fragrance. A photo of Joshua and Michaela hung from the safety charm in the front. The seat cushions were the Hello Kitty ones Michaela liked. They were already showing faint signs of wear. Clearly, they had been there for quite some time. I shifted to another spot and felt something underneath me. I picked it up and saw that it was a tube of lipstick. Joshua glanced at it through the rearview mirror and reached back to take it. "It must be Mickey's. She's been looking for it for ages." I didn't expect it to be in the back seat. Traces of Michaela were everywhere in the car. This was Joshua's car. Yet I, his girlfriend, seemed more like an outsider than Michaela did. What Joshua had called on the way turned out to be a long drive with many twists and turns before we finally reached Michaela's home. "I'll go get Mickey. Wait for me in the car," Joshua said. I waited for an hour. My stomach growled with hunger, making me feel dizzy and lightheaded. Unable to bear it any longer, I took one of the buns Joshua had bought and ate it. It didn't make me feel a whole lot better, but it'd have to do for now. Finally, Joshua came back downstairs, carefully holding Michaela's hand. He wore a black suit, and he had even styled his hair for the occasion. Michaela wore an ivory dress, her makeup flawless. Standing together, they looked like the perfect couple. Meanwhile, I looked completely out of place with my bare face, and wearing nothing but a plain t-shirt and jeans. Joshua opened the front passenger door for Michaela, and she slid into the seat with practiced ease. Joshua got into the car as well and said, "Mickey, Vivi came to watch our graduation ceremony." Only then did Michaela notice me in the back seat. She turned and looked me up and down before curling her lips into a smile and feigning surprise. She said, "Oh, you're here too, Vivi? Have you gained weight? The dark circles under your eyes are so bad. If you don't dress yourself up a little, you'll embarrass Josh later." Vivian's POV. I looked down at my slight bump on my stomach. It wasn't noticeable unless one looked closely, but it was proof that the baby existed. I had dark circles under my eyes because I didn't want to miss Joshua's graduation ceremony. I'd deliberately rushed to finish a month's worth of work and taken a red-eye flight. I had arrived in this city 3 days early just to attend his graduation ceremony. Joshua cleared his throat and said, "It's fine. She's not going on stage anyway. She's just sitting in the audience." I lowered my head and looked at my phone without saying anything. The moment Michaela took the breakfast out of the glove compartment, she exclaimed loudly, "Josh, did you eat one of the buns? Why are there only 5 today?" He quickly replied, "What? That's impossible." I watched the lady put all 6 in the bag. Michaela glanced suspiciously at me. Maybe someone stole one. Joshua turned to look at me. I looked up and met his gaze calmly. I was starving, so I ate one. "Is there a problem? You bought the food, Joshua. Am I not even allowed to eat one bun?" Before Joshua could say anything, Michaela had already thrown all the food out the window. She huffed, "Josh, I'm not eating something someone else has already eaten. That's disgusting." Joshua frowned. He looked at the sulking Michaela for a moment and patiently coaxed her. "How about I make it up to you at the cafeteria?" Michaela didn't object, silently accepting his offer. Joshua turned back to me. "Next time you want something, tell me beforehand. Don't fight with Mickey over it." I found it utterly ridiculous. So, in Joshua's point of view, I had to report to him before eating a bun. I asked quietly, "Joshua, do you even remember who your girlfriend is?" The car fell silent. Joshua didn't answer. It didn't matter because I already knew the answer in my heart. The moment the car reached the campus entrance, Michaela got out in a huff. Without even sparing me a glance, Joshua hurried after her. I leisurely got out of the car. I looked around the college I'd visited many times. I'd traveled thousands of miles to come here and see the man I loved. It was also a place I had dreamed about time and again. I had always held such beautiful fantasies about it. But now that the rose-tinted glasses were gone, it looked no different from any other campus. I asked a passerby for directions, and he pointed me toward the graduation ceremony. By the time I arrived, the ceremony was already halfway over. As an outstanding graduate, Joshua went on stage to give a speech. His voice boomed through the microphone. I was fortunate to spend 4 wonderful years at this college. Thank you, everyone. And the person I want to thank most is... At that moment, Michaela walked onto the stage with flushed cheeks, holding a bouquet of flowers. She handed it to Joshua. Joshua smiled and finished his sentence. Michaela, who's always been by my side. Thunderous applause erupted from the audience, mixed with cheers and teasing shouts. Kiss her. Kiss her. Unable to resist everyone's enthusiasm, Joshua kissed Michaela on the cheek. The atmosphere instantly reached a fever pitch. Expressionless, I applauded along with everyone else. Then, I took out my phone and scheduled an appointment for that afternoon. When the ceremony ended, Joshua sent me a text message. We're going to a get-together. Go back to the hotel and get some rest. I didn't reply. As I was leaving the auditorium, I overheard several professors talking about Joshua. Joshua was one of our best students. How come he didn't get a recommendation for graduate school? To be young. He let love go to his head. He was originally offered the spot, but he came to me and said he wasn't going to graduate school. He wanted to look for a job with Michaela. He really doesn't know how good he had it. He had such a great opportunity to go straight to graduate school. And there was only one spot in the entire college. Does he even know what he threw away? I smiled. Of course Joshua knew. The path I was walking now was the very path Joshua had once planned for himself. Except back then, I had thought this would be Joshua's life as well. I thought I was destined to spend my entire life looking at his back from afar, trying to catch up. But after Michaela entered the picture, Joshua gradually strayed from that path. Back in high school, he'd ranked first in our entire grade. Our school was the best high school in the city. He had a chance of becoming the city's top scorer. But he had unexpectedly performed poorly on it, and only managed to get into a mediocre college. Vivian's POV. Meanwhile, I had performed better than I ever had before. I'd ranked 10th in the entire city and had been accepted into the best college. Afterward, countless teachers lamented what a shame it was. Some even said Joshua had fallen behind in his own studies because he had been tutoring me. For a long time, I had thought that was true too, so I had never dared mention it in front of him. It wasn't until 7 years later that I finally learned the truth. Now, with the harsh reality laid bare before me, I was forced to face the ugly truth that had been hidden for 7 years. Joshua had never loved me. There had never been a place for me in his future. Even though I had walked beside him this entire time, and even though I was good enough, I had never been one of his choices. After leaving the college, I took a cab to the hospital. Once I arrived, I took the consent form for the abortion from the doctor and signed my name. If there was no place for me in Joshua's future, how could I expect him to treat this tiny life any differently? The anesthesia gradually took effect. I closed my eyes, and all the arduous journeys I had made across the country over the years surfaced in my mind. There was a popular belief that the 7th year is when many relationships started to fall apart. Joshua and I happened to reach the end of our relationship in our 7th year together. Since there was no place for me in his future, I erased him from mine as well. From now on, both of us had nothing to do with each other. The procedure ended quickly. The life Joshua and I had created together became nothing more than a tiny mass of blood. With his tacit consent and indifference, I personally ended the future that he and I had once carried together. I rested for the entire afternoon and gathered enough strength to leave. But when I went downstairs, I saw Joshua rushing inside with Michaela in his arms. Panic filled his face as he shouted, "Doctor, my friend got burned." Sure enough, there was a burn on Michaela's hand. The doctor immediately took her into a room for treatment. Joshua waited outside. And as I was leaving, I happened to walk past him. When he saw me, his hand shot out to grab me, and he looked incredibly shocked to see me there. "Vivi, why are you at the hospital?" he asked worriedly. "Are you feeling sick?" I shook off his hand and replied perfunctorily, "It's nothing. I just came for a checkup." Joshua didn't believe me. He frowned as he took in my pale lips and the cold sweat covering my forehead. His face was full of concern for me. He gently wiped the sweat from my forehead, and the worry in his eyes was impossible to hide. "What's wrong? Why do you look so weak? Take me to the doctor who examined you. I need to ask them exactly what's going on, or I won't be able to stop worrying," he said in a rush. I looked at him. He did look genuinely anxious, and his concern was completely undisguised. It didn't seem to be fake. I thought perhaps I did have a tiny place in his heart, even if I couldn't compare to Michaela. But so what? It was already far too late. Perhaps our relationship had already ended the day he gave up the last 2 questions for her. It had simply taken 7 years for the final verdict to arrive. Before I could say anything, Michaela's pitiful cries came from inside the room. "Josh, it hurts so much. Can you come in and stay with me?" Joshua instinctively let go of my hand and said apologetically, "Vivi, wait until I come out. We'll talk after." The warmth of his hands still lingered on mine. His hands had always been warm. I couldn't deny that they had comforted me countless times before. But now, that warmth belonged to someone else. After watching him walk inside, I silently said goodbye. Then, I turned and left without hesitation. Between Michaela and me, I would always come second. This time, I wouldn't wait anymore. I took a cab back to the hotel, packed my luggage, and gathered up everything that belonged to me. The 7-day trip I had deliberately squeezed into my schedule ended after only 3 days. I had been so excited when I arrived, but now I felt nothing in my heart. Before I boarded the plane, I took one last look around the city. For the past 4 years, every time I had come here, my heart had pounded with anticipation. The man I had once loved most had been here. And because he was here, every journey across thousands of miles had been worthwhile. But now, all that anticipation and meaning came to a complete end at this moment. The future Joshua and I might have had ended here as well. The flight back to my university city was quiet. Above the clouds, the sky stretched out in an endless pale blue, untouched by the mess of human affection and regret. When I landed, I took a taxi straight to the small apartment I had rented near my university campus. I didn't cry. I didn't smash anything. Instead, I opened my closet, pulled out a large cardboard box, and began sorting through 7 years of memories. There were ticket stubs from the train trips I had taken to visit Joshua during our freshman year. There was a silver necklace he had bought me with his first part-time paycheck, cheap, slightly tarnished now, but something I used to treasure like a royal heirloom. There was a photo album filled with pictures of us at the beach, holding hands under the afternoon sun. In every photo, I was looking at him. And in every photo his eyes were turned slightly to the side, distracted, distant, or staring at his phone screen. I had been blind for 7 years, convincing myself that his coldness was just his personality. I had thought he was a man of few words, a serious scholar who didn't know how to express romance. I threw the ticket stubs, the necklace, and the photo album into the recycling bin outside the apartment building. Then I sat down at my desk and pulled up my email. My graduate advisor at Switzerland's Federal Institute of Technology, the top research institution in my field globally, had sent me the final confirmation letter 3 days ago. Dear Ms. Vivian Chin, we are pleased to confirm your full fellowship for the PhD program in materials science. I typed back a brief, polite response. Dear Professor Weber, thank you for this incredible opportunity. I have finalized my visa documents and will arrive in Zurich 2 weeks ahead of the autumn term. I closed the laptop screen. At 9 o'clock that night, my phone rang. The screen lit up with Joshua's name. I let it ring 3 times before picking it up. Vivi. His voice came through the speaker, breathless and tinged with an unusual edge of panic. Where are you? I went back to the hotel, but the front desk said you checked out hours ago. Why didn't you wait for me? I told you we'd talk after I finished helping Mickey with her medicine. I leaned back against my chair, looking out at the city lights through my window. I went home, Joshua, I said evenly. He let out a sharp sigh of frustration, though he tried to soften his tone. Vivi, why are you being like this? You flew all the way here to see my graduation. We were supposed to spend the week together before you went back to prepare your paperwork. Did you leave just because I spent a few hours helping Mickey at the hospital? No. Irreplaceably. I left because I was done. There was a brief pause on the line. He scoffed lightly, as if amused by what he assumed was a childish outburst. Vivi, don't play word games with me. I know you're upset that I gave up the graduate school recommendation. You wanted us to go abroad together, I get it. But Mickey's family has been going through a rough patch, and she couldn't find a good job on her own. I'm a man. I can work hard here for a few years and apply again later. Why can't you be a little more understanding? A man. I almost smiled. He spoke of his sacrifice for Michaela, as if it were a noble act of chivalry, entirely oblivious to the fact that he was tearing down the girl who had actually stood by his side through 7 years of long-distance longing. Joshua, I said, my voice as calm as still water. You didn't give up the recommendation for a noble reason. You left those 2 questions blank on your college entrance exam 7 years ago for her, too, didn't you? Silence fell over the line like a heavy iron curtain. I could hear his breathing falter. The smug, coaxing tone vanished in an instant. Who told you that? His voice shook slightly. Nobody told me, I said. Michaela posted it online. It's viral now. Tens of thousands of people are admiring the boy who threw away his future to stay in the same city as his childhood sweetheart. Vivi, listen to me. You don't need to explain, Joshua, I interrupted quietly. You told me 7 years ago that you failed those 2 questions because you had a migraine. I spent 7 years feeling guilty, thinking you fell behind because you spent too much time tutoring me in high school. I worked myself to the bone every single day at university just so I could stand beside you as an equal. My fingers tightened slightly around the phone, but my tone remained utterly devoid of anger. It turns out I was competing with a ghost. You were never behind me, Joshua. You just chose to walk backward to stay with her. Vivi, it's not like that. Joshua's voice suddenly grew shrill, filled with a raw, unfamiliar desperation. Michaela is just a sister to me. I've been with you for 7 years. You're my girlfriend. I'm planning our future. We don't have a future, Joshua, I said softly. I went to the hospital this afternoon. He froze. What? What hospital? The municipal clinic near your campus, I replied, staring at my reflection in the dark window pane. I signed the consent form and had the pregnancy terminated. A sharp, ragged gasp echoed through the receiver. You were pregnant? Joshua's voice shattered completely. Vivi, you were carrying my child. Why didn't you tell me? Why would you? Because there is no room for 3 people in a home, I said, cutting him off before he could speak another word. And I don't raise children with men who belong to someone else. Vivi, wait. Don't hang up. I'm buying a ticket now. I'm coming to see you. Don't bother, I said. If you come, I won't open the door. Have a good life. With Michaela, Joshua. I ended the call, immediately slid his number into my block list, and pulled his contact out of every social media account I owned. Then, I turned off my phone, laid down on my bed, and slept soundly for the first time in 7 years. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of swift, methodical efficiency. I terminated the lease on my apartment, donated half my books to the university library, and packed 2 large suitcases containing only my essentials. My professors at the university held a small farewell dinner for me, praising my dedication and wishing me success at Zurich. In their eyes, I was a rising star in materials engineering, a brilliant young scholar with a limitless horizon. Nobody mentioned Joshua. To my university colleagues, he was just a distant boyfriend from another school whom I rarely spoke about. Meanwhile, in the city thousands of miles away, Joshua's world was slowly beginning to splinter. Because I had blocked his number, he tried calling my roommates, my friends, and even my thesis advisor. But I had already informed my close friends that we had broken up. When he called my roommate, Sarah, demanding to know where I was, Sarah didn't mince words. Joshua, you have some nerve calling her, Sarah snarled into the receiver. Vivian gave up 4 years of her youth traveling on red-eye flights just to see you for a few hours. She spent her weekends eating cheap convenience store meals so she could save up for train tickets to your city. And what were you doing? Playing Prince Charming to your little sister. Sarah, please just tell me where she is. Joshua begged, his voice cracked with exhaustion. I made a mistake. I'll break off contact with Michaela. I'll apply to graduate school next year. Just let me talk to Vivi. She left for Europe this morning, Sarah said coldly. And she told us to tell you one thing if you ever called. What? What did she say? She said, the boy who left 2 questions blank belongs in the past. Don't look for her again. Sarah hung up and blocked his number too. Standing in his rented apartment in the provincial capital, Joshua held his phone against his ear, listening to the dull, mechanical dial tone. The apartment was messy. Empty takeout containers cluttered the coffee table, and piles of unsorted laundry lay on the couch. Michaela was sitting on the rug, her eyes glued to her phone, whining loudly. Josh, did you buy the strawberry shortcake I asked for? And my hand still hurts from that burn. Why haven't you cooked dinner yet? Joshua turned his head slowly to look at her. For 7 years, he had viewed Michaela as a delicate flower that needed his constant protection. He had convinced himself that Vivian was strong, independent, and capable of taking care of herself, while Michaela was fragile and couldn't survive in the world without him. He had felt a sense of grand, heroic satisfaction whenever he stepped in to solve Michaela's problems. But now, looking at her sitting among the trash, complaining about cake while his chest felt as if it had been carved out with a rusty knife, a sudden wave of nauseating disgust surged up his throat. Michaela, Joshua said, his voice flat and dead. Get out. Michaela blinked, stunned. What did you say? I said, get out of my apartment, Joshua repeated, stepping forward, his hands clenched into tight, trembling fists. Pack your things and leave. Josh, are you crazy? Michaela scrambled to her feet, her voice rising in outrage. You gave up your graduate school spot for me. You promised my parents you'd take care of me in this city. How can you throw me out over a temper tantrum from Vivian? Vivian didn't throw a temper tantrum, Joshua whispered, tears finally bursting from his eyes, dripping onto his collar. She left me. She had an abortion and she left the country. Michaela scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. So what? She's just dramatic. She's been with you for 7 years. Where else could she go? Once she realizes how hard it is out there, she'll come crawling back to you like she always does. She's at ETH Zurich, Joshua roared, his face flushing with a terrifying, blood-red fury as he slammed his palm against the dining table. She's at one of the top universities in the world. She doesn't need me. She never needed me. I was the one holding her back. Michaela shrank back, terrified by the raw, murderous rage in his eyes. She had never seen Joshua like this. In her memory, he had always been gentle, patient, and compliant, a boy who would leave exam questions blank just to stay by her side. Get out, Joshua rasped, pointing a shaking finger at the door. Before I make you. Michaela grabbed her designer handbag, her face twisted in resentment, and slammed the door as she ran out into the hallway. The apartment fell dead quiet. Joshua sank onto the floor, clutching his head in his hands, and let out a long, ragged scream into the empty room. Online, the post that Michaela had boastfully created 3 weeks ago continued to circulate, but the atmosphere in the comments section had shifted drastically. At first, young girls had commented with envy, praising the devotion of the boy, who left 2 questions blank. But netizens were inherently curious. Someone managed to track down Michaela's public social media accounts and noticed something strange. In a vlog posted 2 years ago, Michaela was seen showing off a birthday gift from Joshua, a high-end camera worth several $1,000s. In the comments of that video, a classmate from Joshua's university had left a remark. Wait, didn't Joshua's actual girlfriend Vivian work 3 part-time jobs during her sophomore year just to pay for her own lab equipment? Why is he buying 4-figure cameras for his childhood friend, while his girlfriend eats 5 yuan instant noodles in the dorm? The thread blew up instantly. Internet sleuths began digging deeper. They found Vivian's public academic profile on the university website, a brilliant student who had published 3 first author papers in international journals, 1 national scholarships, and maintained a flawless 3.9 GPA while balancing part-time work. They also found records from Joshua's department. He had been a top contender for the prestigious international recommendation, but he had formally signed a waiver declining the offer just 2 weeks before graduation, citing personal family arrangements. The narrative transformed overnight. The romantic boy who sacrificed his future for love was stripped of his poetic coat and exposed for what he truly was, a manipulative, hypocritical coward who gaslit a brilliant woman for 7 years while indulging his own ego with a needy, spoiled leech. Comments flooded Michaela's boastful post. Gross. So he cheated emotionally on his hard-working girlfriend of 7 years to play Prince Charming for a girl who can't even pass her basic college exams? The girlfriend got into ETH Zurich. She's literally a genius. Thank God she escaped this toxic black hole. Imagine leaving 2 questions blank on an exam for a girl who brags about it on the internet while your actual partner is grinding in the lab until midnight. The embarrassment. Girlfriend threw the baby away and moved to Switzerland. Queen behavior. Let the 2 trash bags stay together in their mediocrity. Michaela tried deleting the comments, but the backlash was relentless. Her account was swamped with tens of thousands of scolding messages. Panicked and humiliated, she set her profile to private and deleted all 20 videos detailing her history with Joshua. Her dream of becoming a famous lifestyle influencer crashed before it even began. And Joshua? He didn't look at the internet. He didn't go to work. He spent 2 weeks sitting in his dark apartment, drinking cheap liquor until his stomach bled. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Vivian standing under the bright sun at his graduation ceremony, wearing a plain t-shirt, pale from a red-eye flight, her eyes filled with a quiet, dying light as she watched him kiss Michaela on the cheek. He remembered how she had clapped for him softly among the crowd, holding her stomach, carrying the tiny life they had created together. And he had told her, she's not going on stage anyway. She's just sitting in the audience. The pain in his stomach flared up, sharp and burning, but it was nothing compared to the suffocating, black abyss inside his chest. 3 years later, Zurich, Switzerland. The autumn wind carried the crisp scent of pine and clear lake water across the plaza of the Federal Institute of Technology. Inside the auditorium of the International Conference on Advanced Nanomaterials, the applause was deafening. On the main stage stood a young woman in a tailored ivory suit, her dark hair styled in a sleek, elegant bob. Her eyes were bright, confident, and sharp, reflecting the light of the massive presentation screen behind her. Dr. Vivian Chen, lead researcher, Zurich Quantum Materials Laboratory. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My voice echoed clearly through the surround sound speakers in fluent, flawless English. Our team's latest findings on room temperature superconductors will be published in Nature next month. The crowd rose for a standing ovation. Renowned professors, industry titans, and senior researchers queued up near the stage, waiting to shake my hand and exchange business cards. Among them was a young man wearing a sharp suit, Julian, a senior fellow from Cambridge whom I had been collaborating with for the past year. Brilliant presentation, Vivian, Julian smiled, handing me a glass of sparkling water as we stepped toward the VIP lounge. The director of the Max Planck Institute wants to invite you for dinner tonight. I'd be honored, I smiled softly, taking a sip of the water. My life over the past 3 years had been vibrant, challenging, and immensely fulfilling. I had traveled across Europe for conferences, hiked the Swiss Alps with brilliant colleagues, and built a career that belonged entirely to me. The girl who used to count pennies to buy train tickets across the country felt like a distant, faded character in a story I had read a long time ago. As Julian and I walked through the glass doors toward the conference lobby, a man suddenly pushed past the security barrier near the entrance. Vivian. The voice was raspy, broken, and filled with a desperate, trembling urgency. I stopped in my tracks. Standing 10 feet away, held back by 2 tall Swiss security guards, was a man in a rumpled, cheap suit. He was thin, so thin his collar hung loosely around his neck. His hair was messy, streaked with early gray at the temples, and his eyes were bloodshot, sunken, and wild. It took me 3 full seconds to recognize him. Joshua. 3 years had transformed the once promising student leader of our high school into a hollow, exhausted middle-aged man before his 30-year-old birthday. Vivian, it's really you, Joshua whimpered, his eyes locking onto my face, with a look that bordered on religious devotion. I bought a third-class flight ticket. I waited outside the venue for 2 days just to get a guest pass. Julian frowned, stepping slightly in front of me. Vivian, do you know this man? Should I call security to escort him out? It's fine, Julian, I said calmly, stepping around him. He's an old acquaintance from high school. An old acquaintance. The words hit Joshua like a physical blow. He flinched, his chest heaving as tears welled up in his red eyes. Vivi. He stepped forward, his voice trembling violently. Can I talk to you for 10 minutes? Just 10 minutes. Please. I looked at my watch. I had 20 minutes before my dinner meeting with the Max Planck director. 5 minutes, I said, walking toward a quiet coffee corner near the glass floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Zurich. Joshua sat across from me at the small wooden table, his hands trembling so hard he couldn't even lift his paper coffee cup. He stared at me, at my flawless skin, my elegant suit, my calm, steady eyes, and then looked down at his own worn leather shoes and frayed cuffs. The gap between us was no longer just the thousands of miles between continents. It was the vast, unbridgeable chasm between 2 completely different worlds. How have you been, Vivi? He asked softly, his tone pathetic and small. I've been very good, Joshua, I replied politely. My research is going well. And you? Joshua let out a bitter, self-deprecating laugh. I left the provincial capital 2 years ago, he whispered, staring at his reflection in the dark coffee. I broke off all contact with Michaela. She tried to sue me for emotional damages after her internet reputation fell apart, and her family came to my company to make a scene. I lost my job. He wiped a tear from his cheek with a dirty knuckle. I'm working at a small logistics firm in my hometown now. The pay is barely enough to cover rent. My parents are disappointed in me. Everyone in our high school alumni group knows what I did. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a raw, agonizing plea. Vivi, I was stupid. I thought I was being a hero, protecting a girl who couldn't take care of herself. I didn't realize that the person who truly loved me, the person who was building a life for us, was you. He reached across the table, trying to grasp my hand. I haven't touched another woman in 3 years, Vivi. I think about you every single night. I remember every train ticket you saved. I remember the soup you made for me when I had a fever in high school. He began to sob openly, ignoring the curious glances from passing scholars. I brought the 2 exam questions, he stammered, pulling a crumpled, yellowed piece of notebook paper from his inner jacket pocket. The ones I left blank 7 years ago. I solved them, Vivi. I wrote the answers down. Look, I got them right. I'm smart enough to stand beside you. Please, can we just start over? I looked at the yellowed paper resting on the clean wooden table. Written on it were 2 complex calculus solutions, written in his familiar, neat handwriting. 7 years ago, those 2 missing solutions had altered the trajectory of our lives. He had thought he was performing a grand romantic gesture for Michaela, throwing away his rank so she wouldn't feel inferior. And now, 7 years later, he was bringing the solved equations to me like a beaten dog presenting a dirty stick to its owner. I didn't reach out to touch the paper. I simply looked at him, my heart entirely devoid of hatred, anger, or warmth. Joshua, I said gently. He looked up, a tiny spark of desperate hope igniting in his sunken eyes. Do you know why I didn't cry when I left your hotel room 3 years ago? I asked. He swallowed hard, shaking his head slowly. Because my grief didn't start on the day of your graduation, I said softly. It started during our first year of university, when I waited 3 hours in the snow at your campus gates while you were buying hot tea for Michaela, because she had a sore throat. Joshua's face went dead white. It continued during our second year. I went on, my voice as smooth and steady as a clock ticking. When I spent my birthday alone in the library because you forgot, while posting photos of Michaela's birthday cake on your feed. I looked into his bloodshot eyes. My love for you didn't die in an instant, Joshua. It eroded piece by piece, over 7 long years. By the time I saw that video online, the person who loved you had already been dead for a very long time. Tears poured down his face, soaking into his rumpled collar. Vivi, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The surgery at the clinic 3 years ago wasn't just the end of a pregnancy, I said, standing up from the chair and adjusting my jacket. It was the day I buried the last remnant of my youth. I picked up my leather portfolio. Keep the paper, Joshua. Give it to someone who still cares about your exams. As for me, my future has no room for boys who look backward. I turned my back on him. Vivi, Vivi. He shrieked behind me, throwing himself out of the chair, crashing onto the marble floor, reaching his trembling hands toward my retreating shadow. Please, don't leave me again. Vivi. The security guard stepped in, holding his sobbing, broken body down on the floor as he wept hysterically, clutching the yellowed piece of paper to his chest like a lunatic. I didn't stop my steps. I walked through the tall glass doors of the auditorium, out into the brilliant, golden Swiss sunshine. Julian was waiting near a sleek black sedan, holding 2 coats against the autumn breeze. All set? Julian asked with a warm smile. All set, I smiled back, slipping my arms into my coat, taking a deep breath of the cold, clean mountain air. The sky was vast, the road ahead was wide, and I was finally beautifully free. Epilogue. 10 years later, the High School Alumni Association of the Provincial First High School held its 20-year reunion at a local hotel. The room was filled with middle-aged men and women chatting about their children, their mortgages, and their careers. Sitting in a quiet corner was a man in his late 30s wearing a faded, cheap jacket. He had a slight stoop, deep lines around his mouth, and hands that were rough from years of warehouse labor. It was Joshua. He drank his cheap beer in silence, listening to his former classmates talk. Did you guys see the news this morning? An old classmate remarked, holding up his tablet. Vivian Chen just won the National Medal of Technology. She's the youngest scientist ever inducted into the Academy of Sciences. The screen showed a news broadcast. Vivian, regal, radiant, and magnificent, standing beside world leaders, receiving a gold medal, her smile dazzling and bright. Man, Vivian was incredible back in high school, another classmate sighed. Remember how Joshua used to be her boyfriend? They were together for 7 years. Everyone turned to look at Joshua sitting in the corner. Joshua didn't speak. He stared at the golden medal on the news screen, his trembling fingers clutching his beer glass until the knuckles turned white. A classmate asked casually, "Hey Joshua, what happened between you two anyway? Why did you guys break up after 7 years?" Joshua took a long, bitter gulp of the stale beer, his throat burning like fire. He closed his eyes, remembering the cool, soft breeze of Zurich 10 years ago, and the quiet, distant voice of the girl who had once loved him more than her own life. My future has no room for boys who look backward. Tears mixed with the cheap beer slid down his weathered cheeks. I didn't lose her, Joshua whispered into his glass, his voice cracking into a silent, agonizing sob that nobody heard. I threw my own life away.